ones going to get hold of the poets from India and South Africa because they all know me. But then I found that it was easy. And then I had to get hold of another poet from Victoria. Her name is Zena Velloo. She's a quite well-known poet, and she's, I would say, also a feminist activist. And she was very excited, and I said, every poem which comes would be edited and seen by you first, then you send it to me with your corrections, and then you give it back to the poet to see whether the corrections are right. So to do this, it took 1 year, from April last year to this year. And it was a tremendous job working on a book and trying to fuse two great democracies and feminist activists of both countries who did a lot of things in a lot of spheres. And that is what we will sort of describe. Now, feminism is something which we are aware from our China. Why I say that is just that in India and even in South Africa, I've seen that the woman is a little bit thought as below, and the man is considered a little higher. And you won't believe that in my house in Delhi, there is a woman, Islamic woman, who gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning and does cooking and cleaning of about 7 or 8 houses, and then she comes back, she takes her children to the school. And what does the father do? The father is not doing anything. But with all due respect, she doesn't have any disrespect for her father. She says, that is my karma. So I let him rest. So when we look at such type of irregularities, and understand the mind is already sort of bent into that direction. And whether we as men activists can help the women activists to understand the stature and believe that they should be helping in other directions. Now, I have with me our Masimanania chairperson, and there's Leanne, and under her mentorship, I worked from 1995 to this year when I thought of retiring. In fact, I didn't retire. The hospital kicked me out. There was a nursing CEO, Mitra, who does not know what is the value of gender violence and what is the value of tutuzela, and why should there be a doctor there. So that means we are paying extra money to the doctor. And he just said, no, Dr. Mitra, I don't think we need you. So I also did not went into a because I understood that this fellow is a nurse. He does not know what gender violence means. And I was covering not only dansa hai, but I was covering the whole of East London. And I said, thank you, no problem. Don't give me any appreciation certificate. I'm quite comfortable. I'm going out. From 1994, today I'm going out. You don't have to. So he was also not sure what is this thing. And now when I call my colleagues, they said, Dr. Mitra, there are 8 victims sitting there for 8 hours, out of which 6 are children who have been sexually assaulted, and there is no examiner. So I said, well, tell Sikelo, Dr. Mitra wishes him best of luck. I'm not coming. So, although I see suddenly that he has been given a big shield for his best work in the Department of Health, and I understood that this guy, I don't know why he's been given what he has done for the hospital. When I'm talking, Mr. Pillay is looking this way and that way because it confronts him also. So I know, Mr. Pillay, I'm sorry. It is just you are here, but I would have said the same thing over and over again. I feel sorry for those people. I went at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, driving there, sitting and doing 6 evidences and going to all the courts to find out, and 2,800 double life sentences throughout my career. It was because of my evidence. And finally, the SAPS recognized me and gave me the post of colonel and also an ambassador to the Provincial Commission. But let's not talk about this. We are here to talk about, but somehow these are all joined together. Female assault. Why female assault? But why children are being assaulted nowadays? Out of 8, there are 6 children who are being sexually assaulted. 2 are only females. So even what we try to do or try to help by collecting the evidence and try and get the perpetrator behind the bars, there are more people coming. And of course, I would like to tell you also that this country has become a hot tourism spot for child prostitution. That means people from Europe come and they are being given the place and child prostitutes are provided. So that's why we find that there is a... Now, the main thing which I would, of course, Mr. Pillay will say, and of course, there's Leanne, and of course, it is more of a debate, that what exactly is feminism? We believed in feminism because we found that our parents were... My father was not having a bad relation with my mother, but he gently asked her to stay at home and not to go out and not to cook, bring the utensils and things like that. It is his job to go and do that. So then I understood that there is some problem which is coming from generation onwards. But this thing has not changed yet. the woman is. So when I was in Delhi, the Delhi is a autonomous is an autonomous province. It is not uh, like for example we call it Pretoria has its own chief minister. It is an autonomous province. So Delhi is an autonomous province with the People's Party, the Aam Aadmi Party, the People's Party have removed the rightists and they have captured the imagination of the Delhiites. And this book was launched by the Chief Minister, Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, and Zena Agarwal, the Legislative Assembly member. And immediately after seeing this thing, he ordered 500 copies for the library of all Delhi libraries. It he had. But what I would initiate the debate is whether feminism is a true word or a false word in the present circumstances, in the present social circumstances, in the present political circumstances, and feminist activists, who are they? Are they people like Leon Leslie Yang, or are they people like people who are in the kitchen, but they still keep on thinking that why am I sitting in the kitchen? I should have been going out. So, whether feminine activism is a social activism, whether it's a political activism, or whether it is just an activism for everybody, not for females. And I don't want to name the name, but there are many activists, social activists, political activists, going right from Cecilia Makiwane to Eleanor Sisudu. And in India also we have got many who have been right, the right is extreme right. So once while we are having cup of tea, the chief minister came to me, as you gave up, and he said, "Dr. Mitra, I'm very happy that you asked me to launch, because if you were to ask Modi to launch this book, you would have been behind bars, because there are poems on Israeli, the Muslim majority fighting for their rights, and how they were beaten by the right government, and it went for 1 month, and when the food was given by the opposite religious, they were Muslims, the Hindus gave them the food every day. So one can't say that we are not secular. So in that way, I opened up this discussion to the panel, and I would like to ask Mr. Pillai to come, and this is the book, and this is Dansan, and this is, I think he knows about it. The elderly grandmother looks after the younger daughter with her baby, and there is a sort of a feeling, a combination of feelings between all three of them, and there is no male, no around, but they are very happy, and that is a common picture, common thing which you see in Tanzania. And I just took a picture and made a photo painting out of it. The small dog was somewhere nearby. So thank you very much.
Let me greet Honorable MEC in absentia. He is supposed to be here. Dr. Mitra, all distinguished guests here, including my former people in the Department of Education. My name is Anil Pillai. I'm a member of the Provincial Parliament. He's talking about his problems in health. I'm the whip of the Portfolio Committee of Health. We are listening to it. It is true, there are issues. Well, that is for another day. What validates me to stand here is a bigger question than, because this is a place, all of you sitting here, truly understanding. It's not only about feminism, When we talk of gender violence, during COVID, the call center received 500,000 calls. When people were together, the husband and wife, children, all together, 500,000 calls within 4 months received in call center. That is gender-based violence at the highest level, because these are husband and wife, they knew each other. But the question here is that when we talk of feminism, we need to put our dimensions in a completely different framework. I'm not disagreeing with Dr. Mitra, but I'm saying that feminism in its own dimensions, and when we look for the roots in the contemporary politics or even previous times, it is actually, you will find roots which is crossover, which may even find up our own existence within where we come from. Well, I'm not taking that task to be doing that. The only thing qualifying me to stand here, Dr. Mitra, is I also write opinion columns in Daily Dispatch and other I do write. I think otherwise you sitting here are better than me to stand here and talk. I had almost 32 years experience within the education spectrum. One thing which we learned from the education sector is that anything when we discuss, whether it is arts, sports, any manifestation of any form of art or any other things, we look through the eyes of a teacher. I was a director for training for teachers in the province, but I was a teacher. Fundamentally, I was a teacher. And always we are teachers. Today, when we look at this particular book, I think Dr. Mitra should not worry how many people are here. The British historian, Arnold Toynbee, I don't like some of his ideas, but what he said is very important. He said, it is the creative minority which makes difference in life. It is not the passive majority. In this kind of setups, where we discuss about art, where we discuss about how the contemporary arts can change the lives of the people, it is practically impossible this place to be filled. So I am saying that whoever sitting here are the right recipients. We always say as a teacher that when you teach, it must reach to the right level. Then only the person who is receiving can accept it and receive it. So I'm saying that this audience is good enough. But my problem is that should we go deeper into the feminism or should we discuss about this book? I think here you are talking about anthology of poems. When we discuss about anything regarding that kind of a subject, remember it always touches the culture it comes from. Anything you look at the poem, the characteristics of the poems, what the poet wants to transfer the information to the people who are actually enjoying the poem, definitely the influence is the culture around it. And that is why your subject becomes very key. So I think I need to go few things, probably 3 or 4 minutes, then so that we'll have a discussion on this based on this particular item. It is important that this book, if you look at when you get, you will see that there's a caption. And it's a very interesting caption which I need to say. That feminism is changing dimensions in the year to year. And this is true. 10 years back or a decade back, how you look at feminism, that lens has changed. It's completely a different look. I had a chat with ma'am when I was coming here, or when we were chatting. It is true that we are all worried about the way the women are placed in the society. But I was trying to say to her, things have changed. Maybe it is a snail's place. The pace is not there, but there is change. Here he is saying, he is talking about one of the great Indian modern, we could call it a modernist, because there was a system in India when the husband passed away, the funeral pyre, that is the fire, the wife also should jump and die. That was the customary way it was said. It was like that. At any stage, the age, other factors does not determine. The moment, probably they got married, he went for a war, he died. Remember, during those times, it was all kingdom and all that, always there are wars and all that. He died. Then in that fire, it's a must that the wife had to jump, whether she likes it or not. You can see how horrible was it. But that has changed. And we call it, in India they will call it sati. And that was abolished because of Raja Ram Mohan Rai, a modernist came into it. He also mentioned here, interestingly, and I'm not going through all, he is talking about prominent women poets bears open feminism of the age in South Africa, India, bonded by Mahatma Gandhi to see the proactiveness of women progressing towards a definitive success. In other words, he is saying that if you analyze the South African context and the Indian context, we will see that in both cases, globally it is true. It's not only in South Africa, and why he says his origin is from India, he is here. So that's why probably he went into these two particular aspects. Globally it is correct that the situation of the women was very bad. And that is why late 2021, in at least 40 women from all over Africa and some women poets, they were established themselves as poets because they had their own poems being written. Unfortunately, as you know, it was not well guarded the momentum simply because the gender base they come from. But what they did is that they collaborated a poetry book which is called Wild Immersions, a womanist anthology of poems. The name was Wild Immersions. It was actually received not only by Africa, internationally, it was an acclaimed work. The book seeks to question patriarchy and other changes. The patriarchy does not exist not only in a workplace. It does not exist not only in a domestic space. It exists throughout, because as you correctly said in the evening, it is the mindset of the people. How you see it, how you view it. It does not come from outside, it comes from within. So that's exactly, so these 40 people, when they come together in Africa, in 1921 when they launched, it became a great success. Why? It opens with poems honoring diverse generations of humans like Sarah Baartman, Rosa Parks. I don't need to explain about Sarah Baartman. I don't need to explain Rosa Parks. All this. And the interesting fact here is that they are coming from different living backgrounds. But if you zoom through, you will always find it ends in the African struggle of women. And we are now talking about Africa specifically. So it is an interesting observation you can make that though it has been, there are poems mentioned about many of these, all this, the focal point of all this comes to the sufferings of the women across Africa. The poems speak about the birth, the death, the fertility, the infertility, the rape, the genital mutilation, the war, the exile, the forced migration. Forced migration. Nigeria, once a land of flourishing agriculture and all that, because of corruption and because of other matters. What is happening there is human trafficking more than anything. Boko Haram, simply taking children, ladies, girls, from a school 250, another school 250. 1,000 girls are being taken. 20 years, the parents are not seeing them. Some of them they have never seen. Then they are being transported to the other places. under the name of anything, whether it is religion, whether it is politics, whether it is social aspect. This is what is happening. So now, these poets were talking about these things. They all not only talked about the problems, they also talked about the joy, the desire, and the expression of sexuality. Because sometimes when you talk of sexuality, children are afraid to say something when what is happening to them simply because of the dilemma and the stigma around them, because the mindset has been completely different. So why do we talk of, in relation to this book, the poets came, they understood that within this sector, this is happening. How do we change? And it was widely recognized. Now we expand this African context to the global context. Globally, it was the same thing. And I quote from a British author and academic, Everasto. She was one of the most famous academics. She used to criticize how when ideologies are put under the gender bias. And this is what she said. The multi-generational cross-cultural anthology is infused in multiple perspectives. In other words, when you are bringing a perspective, probably under the theme of a women concept, it changes. Because it is not it is exclusive to include men. And that is why when you are saying, Dr. Mitra, you are correct. Whatever we are talking about women, is not a women matter. It's a matter of men too. Because they are the second party coming into play. She says, and it's very interesting, she says that the perspectives about the aesthetics, preoccupation, sensibilities, the aesthetic sense, when you watch a picture, when you watch a photograph, the aesthetic sense should be there. But that aesthetic sense is again being differentiated on the gender lines, then it becomes a problem. It offers up a broad sense of community between women writers who are consciously interrogating what it means to the human from unique perspective. What they are saying is that it is important that when a poem comes out from a person, it is not about yourself, it's about the community. So that relationship has been revealed in the poems. So I'm saying that this particular poem, they were talking about actually what has been published in Britain. But the thinking was the same. What thinking happened in 1921? And this particular statement came 10 years before. I'm almost going to sit back. Women are interesting figures, superior and brilliant. This cannot be disputed. They are superior, they are very important, they are brilliant. Unfortunately, that becomes a lip talk. It does not manifest into action, and that's where the problem is. We do say, we do write. So the poets are themselves feeling, and I will say when I'm closing this one, I will. So to analyze with a view of understanding the image of women from a woman's point of view. In other words, how do we view a woman from a woman's perspective? And also a woman from other perspectives is very key. Probably a poet like Dr. Mitra, who represents the male, a man, he may not get the view a woman poet gets about herself or about the society looks at her. So that becomes key. The societal cultures, various nations become important and sensitive. This is a very sensitive matter. And that is why it is important that we need, this is a deeper subject. Meanwhile, the woman image in the understanding and culture of every poet representing their each country have a red thread. They are saying each country you are representing. And that's why this book becomes, once again, we are focusing on that. You are talking about what happened to the women poets in India, what happened in Africa. Definitely, that thread of the country where they meet. And that's why my initial statement, I was saying, the community where you are, the culture you are, it will influence. Lastly on that, which suggests the understanding of the mind not only exists in the aesthetic sense, but also plays an essential role in life. This is very important. Whatever we are talking, because it is art, you cannot actually conform it into an aesthetic sense. No. It also links to the realities of life. Never a poet come out because of he appreciates the beauty, he appreciates what he is seeing. But if he does not have the life experience, probably he will fail to pass that message he wants to pass. And that's exactly what we are saying. In many ways, it's very important. In many ways, women are subordinated. That's a fact. Their position in society is considered lower than the men. In most of the cases, we might nicely speak, Dr. Mitra, in our political, social gatherings, but they are always being considered a bit lower. The works of female authors are less calculated, if you look at that. The importance, the considerations a male poet gets is not getting. That's exactly what we are saying. Their work is no less important than the work of the male author. Yet, if you compare its aesthetic sense, it is composure, the way it is compromised, and either way it was being formed. Maybe better than the other one. But because of that gender bias, it does not exist. Both traditional works of literature and views about humans in literacy work generally reflect an imbalance. That's the point I want to say. There is, if you consider and if you analyze the work on both sides, we will see an imbalance. We will see the marginalization of women. Now, the question is it a calculated marginalization? No. There is that subjective factors. It has been, that's why you said it has been like that. Now, it needs to be changed. The mindset needs to be changed. And that's why I agree with you on that point that it needs to be changed. I am going to close this one. This may assist to deal with the perception that the relationship between men and women is based on. You see, most of the time, what do we believe? We say that men and women, the relationship is about biological and socio-economic factors. It is not true. Beyond the socio-economic factors, beyond that how we live, beyond the sexual and other matters coming from the biological factors, there are many other things which clues to people. And if that matter is not being taken into consideration, then we'll have a problem. When 87 poets, including luminaries like Brooks, June Garden, I'm going to say that in America, 87 poets, they made a anthology, a historical anthology. What came out from many corners, they said it is hard to communicate to anyone who was not an adult at that time. Before that, if you look the anthologies from American poetry back then, only 90% of them were women. And that was changed. Remember, you look at, you analyze, you study, you make comparative studies, you go deep into the literature books. We see most of them are men. That needs to be changed. Certainly, this is where we may start with this particular book. This is where we look at the contemporary difference of how the women poetry and what they represent in these countries needs to be looked. Probably, I did not go through the book. Probably, you might have other dimensions, people to sensitize and people to understand and conceptualize. But the framework or the base we start from is that there were issues. And sometimes, whatever you do in art, in some form, you will see outside the world. In your workplace, in your daily lives, in your social patterns, you will see this. Unfortunately, or fortunately, let me put it that way, both. Unfortunately, this has been the case for some time, but things have been changing. I recently read, I'm not a fan of poems, I read a criticism or a critique about a Latin American young girl who wrote a poem. They were saying that, remember, Latin America is undergoing a very big political change. And here we are not standing for politics, but there's a big political change. And I'm not going to get what political change is taking place, but you see, if you watch the past three elections happened, there is big change. And this young girl is coming. And there are tangible evidence saying that she influenced many of the people. So I'm saying that, Dr. Mitra, these works should enlighten us as men and the community so that we will be adoring and adopting that all the disparities, all that distinctions we give must evaporate. We are standing at a particular time. Ugandan parliament is passing a law against homosexuals, which is totally unacceptable. An orientation not conceived by you, not decided by you, brought to you by your own birth, is being questioned in a parliament where fundamental constitutional rights is being taken. So, this kind of gatherings becomes key, and it's important that this message must go. I think I appreciate your work. You have been constantly doing these things, and you don't worry about whether there is rain or not. You do your work, and that's what is in the literature says that do your work, the fruits thereof. So, on behalf of all of us, on behalf of the communities, I say that it is a very important subject, it's a very key subject, and this subject needs to be addressed. And all little things we do towards that, whether it starts from schools or universities or academia, it will make change. And the change has been seen by people, and I personally believe that the past 10 years has been good in this particular aspect. Thank you very much.
I am first time chairperson of Masimanane, and she has been in the forefront of against the gender violence. She has done so many things. Actually, I am very lucky to have her today here. Otherwise, most of the time she is in United Nations and talking something which I don't understand. But anyway, she must talk.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's certainly a pleasure for me to be here today. I've been working with Dr. Mitra now for many years. While he's been at the Zena Care Center, we've been there for many years, and that Zena Center is a 24-hour rape service, post-rape service for survivors. And he's really, contributed, as he said, 2,800 life sentences for rapists based on his testimony. And I recently asked somebody at the NPA who they thought was the most influential doctor at the Zena Care Center. That's Dr. Jokani, I asked, and he said by far Dr. Mitra, because of the kinds of evidence that he brings. So we're very grateful for that.
With this whole thing, it is no longer a 24-hour.
Oh yeah, we're working on that, Dr. Mitra. With COVID, it was reduced, so that's also a very big slap, for women survivors and children as always. But I think I've always been in awe of your work, Dr. Mitra, because you're such a prolific artist, both visual arts and as a wordsmith. And for you to have had that vision of bringing together poets from India and South Africa, which is geographically so distant, and yet we have so many similarities in culture and so forth, economically, politically, and so forth. That for me, that kind of vision is really a very profound one, and I'm grateful that you've done this for us, because we will all benefit from the collaboration of poets in our particular countries. And I was asked to speak about feminism and feminist activism. And I thought, you, Pillay, have made, some really important points and on what feminism is. But I'd also like to mention, what we as women think of feminism and what it actually means to us. And that is that it is a framework, a political framework for understanding discrimination and oppression of women. And that it is influenced by patriarchy, which is an ideology of male superiority versus women's inferiority. That's what it is in essence. We have a lovely saying that we use on t-shirts from time to time, which says, feminism is the radical notion that women are people.
Yeah.
It's the radical notion. And why should it be radical? Because we as human beings should be equal. And so feminism is embedded in the concept of humanity and of equality, of dignity and of respect. Those are the basic principles that women work with. And we center it around women's experiences of inequality, of discrimination and oppression. That's the most important thing, is that in all of the work as feminists, we center women's lived realities, women's experiences. And those experiences are all influenced by patriarchy, but other systems of oppression as well, systems such as colonialism, post-colonialism, Now as we're talking about decoloniality, we think about that. All of those systems, and apartheid as well, had violence embedded in them. They had violence embedded in them. Those were, there was nothing about it which was about trying to bring about equality or recognizing the dignity and respect of people on an equal basis. So what we've inherited in all of the systems we have, going even further back than colonial times, is this inequality, and it is violence. And now that violence has been normalized in our society. So as feminists, we see feminism as a political tool that we need to engage with to unpack and dismantle these systems of oppression. That's what feminism is about. Feminist activism is when we take that ideology, when we take that political perspective, and we actually engage in strategies, approaches, activities that bring about the dismantling, that bring about the disruption of those systems of oppression. And so the activism could be women on the streets that are protesting very vocally about a particular issue. In South Africa, we had the total shutdown campaign, but the most prolific, most globally well-known is the 1956 march. That was political activism, and that was feminist political activism, because women were at the forefront of organizing, of mobilizing, and of acting on, actually bringing about those protests against the past laws. So that was a very particular kind of political activism, which still continues. Then there's the social activism, which includes the arts, which it's not just what we will call social justice activities, where we do protests and so forth, but it also includes the arts. The arts play a significant role. If you look at women writers through the ages, they have been so influential in changing the thinking of society as a whole. So there have been different waves of feminism. In the first wave, we looked at civil and political rights. And people like Helen Pankhurst were the ones that were fighting for women to have the vote and recognition with empowerments and things like that. The second wave of feminism was looking at the world of work and how women were able to access workspaces. So we've had these different waves of feminism that have looked at different issues. There was another one looking, the third wave, at sexual and reproductive health and rights. And that was linked to work, because women, when they went to have babies, would lose their positions at work, so they didn't want to have babies and so forth. At that point in time, now women just flatly, young women today just like, no, not doing marriage, not doing babies. That's the new thing, because they recognize the need to be, autonomous beings in themselves, and then, to form relationships after that. So it's very important to know those different ways and to understand them, and why women engage in this activism. So as I said, writing has been, very, very profound in changing the thinking and the discourse and the narratives in our society. And there are beautiful writers on our continent. India has produced the most amazing writers with analysis that's so deep and broad, in terms of understanding women's experiences. We have women artists. One of the famous is Frida Kahlo, that we can think about, who also through their visual arts have made broad changes to the world in very, very profound ways. And then there are the wordsmiths, the women whom I perhaps think of as one of the most famous women is Maya Angelou, and she has brought to the fore violence against women in her book The Color Purple. We have people like Marilyn French that has done stuff. Maya Angelou's poetry always speaks about discrimination and oppression of women, and then brings us that hope, brings us that sense of possibility. So poems are such profound teaching tools, as Mr. Blair said, because they move you. they move you internally, and it's not the external that brings about the change, it's that internal connection, it's that awareness, that kind of epiphany that happens when you read a poem and the words catch you, it really makes you think about your particular view on something and how that view needs to change. And so it does bring about profound change in the lives of people, and particularly those who engage with it. It's sad that to a large extent we're losing that a lot, because now our newer generations are into sound bites, and sound bites being just small, short little spurts. They're getting their information and their education from TikTok and FaceTime and things like that, and they lose that ability to really get the learning and the teaching from poems. I think when we were at school, I'm a very old duck here, we had to memorize poems.
Yeah.
And generations before that memorized poems. The power of that, because you can always call on the wisdom from those poems, and then and take that forward. So I know, when I can still recite poetry from Shakespeare, from Khalil Gibran, from Omar Khayyam, these really great poets. I can do that, and I think, and sometimes if I'm called to speak, I'll stand up and I'll just recite a poem, and people are like, "Oh my word, how profound!" But forgetting that that's what we did at school, and it also trained your memory. It trained your memory, So I think those things and the way in which we embrace poetry is changing, and it's unfortunate that we're losing that. We should still have a way in which we can use the poems to change our perspectives of life. In the week, I came across the poem "If Again" by Rudyard Kipling, and I have two grandsons, 14 and 16, and I immediately wanted to share those poems with them, because it is a complete love letter to a son, on how he should, conduct himself. And you don't need anything more. It's a complete framework, And I thought to myself, unfortunately, they both love poetry, how profound it is for me to be able now to say to them, use this. So Dr. Mitra, this fantastic anthology of poems, which I was invited to participate in, and we had some problems around that, is a great gift to our communities and our society. And I hope that we will be able to share it, to hold poetry readings, and there are groups who do that, but not enough of it. I certainly would like to introduce it in my own organization, because we can then debate it. We can look at what the discourse is, what kind of narrative is being put out there. Because for us to change norms, to change mindsets, to change attitudes and behavior, this is the tool that we need, not firearms as the rest of the world thinks. So, and that's what feminism is about. We would use this kind of soft touches in order to change that, rather than militarize or weaponize, the work that we do. So we really appreciate this very much. It's going to be interesting to see, contemporary politics here is going to be something that we will engage with, because I think the women in India, I know because we have a project in India, in Bangalore, as you know, and we had these discussions. We had a meeting this week about the kinds of struggles the women have there, these kind of struggles the women have here. Women struggle everywhere. There's no woman born without that challenge of struggles. An Indian saying that I like to use often is, girls are born with stones in their pockets. This is what the Indians say. They are already weighted down by culture, by religion, by politics, by social inequality, by a lack of economic opportunity. That are weighed down. Girls are born with stones in their pocket. They spend their entire lives taking some up, more gets put in. Taking some up, more gets put in. So what I think is very similar is that we have those experiences on a cultural, religious, economic, political, technological basis now. So all of that, we grapple with in different ways. And the poems here in this book are going to help us to see that and to work through them and to look at how we as feminists can use this as a tool to change our society. And I have to admit that in my lifetime, that change ain't going to happen. Thank you very much, everybody.
Way, but you have always had more power than me as an Indian woman and you as an Indian man, if when we come to a forum such as this or anywhere else. So you know, so this all these isms, racism, gender, sexism, all of this, you won't, like, I can't understand what a homosexual or transgender person goes through, and I can never speak for them. My work is around anti-racism and decoloniality and social justice, but I can never be in their lived experience, and I can't speak on their behalf, because that's just not right. That's then cultural appropriation. That's then taking away someone else's experience of that. And it's the same thing, like if you go from one context to another, which is what you were talking about, the cultural context is so important. So for instance, people always, this was my experience, I'm South African, but when I went to India and people talk about child labor in India, and for the West, it's a very disgusting thing. But when you're there and you see a little boy working with a carpet, and you know he is supporting a whole family who otherwise wouldn't be fed, I can't come with my Western values and say that's wrong. It's an age-old thing in India. It's been going on for centuries. It's a structural thing that needs to be sorted out. And it's the same thing for gender. It's the same thing for gender in India and gender here. There might be similarities, but the whole religion in India and the whole caste system has totally different ramifications. Just like in South America, it's a total different way. And it's not to say gender doesn't happen in the West. It's there. It might just be that women feel they have more rights or more powers, but it's there.
Sometimes it's a false feeling.
Yes, and you see it all over.
We have seen that.
You see it all over those kind of genderized roles, and so.
What they've done with child labour in South America is interesting, is that they, in some places, the children go to work, they go to school for 4 days, so that on the 5th day, they can actually go in and do the weaving or the knitting or anything like that, to get the things ready for the market. So they have a combination, so they actually work with that the child labour is going to be there. Because it's family labour.
Yeah.
It's not just child labour, it's family labour.
And again, it's the economic system.
It's all about economics, all of it, gender.
Thanks, Mr. Pillay. Don't have a drink. I heard you saying you're cheering a meeting. You see,